Hello, I'm Sam Adair with the law firm of Graham Adair, and I'm joined today by my partner, Chad Graham. Chad, thanks for being here.
I'm excited to be here.
We're going to be talking today about self sponsorship in terms of immigration. And Chad, fortunately, is an expert in this field. As we've seen increased demand and difficulty in getting an H 1B, I think a lot of individuals have started to look at faster ways to kind of move through this immigration process, ways that are going to be less tied to specific employment. And so we're going to talk a little bit today about self sponsorship. Chad, what do you make of this increase that we're seeing in interest in self sponsorship?
Yeah, it's been a really interesting sort of transition that I would say has happened quickly. The standard thought convention with the H-1B process is you find an employer, they sponsor your H-1B, you sort of ride that employment-based immigration process train all the way through the green card. That's not to say that there aren't changes of employer that happen or transfers, they do happen. But you sort of ride that train through the end of the process. And now that H-1B is really being taken out as an option for many people, a lot of people are sort of thinking outside of that standard employment-based box.
And so, what does self sponsorship really mean then, as opposed to kind of the traditional employment based sponsorship path?
So the standard employment-based process involves somebody who applies for a job, they find an employer in the United States who says, yes, I will sponsor your work visa. We're talking H-1B, L-1, TN, O-1, those sorts of things. And then the employer will have rules around whether they'll sponsor the green card, how long it might take to get that process started. So then the person kind of goes along with the program and goes through the green card process and eventually gets their green card. For a lot of people, they don't want to be tied to an employer like that. And so they're looking for ways to sort of be unfettered, to give themselves more options, whether it be as an investor or an entrepreneur or things that enable them to work on a wider variety of things rather than sticking with one or a handful of employers through their green card process.
And so, focusing primarily on the permanent residence process, what are the real options that are available for self sponsorship?
Yeah, so the options are somewhat limited. And for the purposes of this video, we're going to be focusing on two things, the national interest waiver and the extraordinary ability category. So national interest waiver, the person is essentially demonstrating that the work that they're doing is a broad spectrum that benefits a lot of people within the United States. So we typically see this within certain fields like medical, biotechnology, technology, and we're seeing more within the finance and banking realms as well. And that's not to say that there's other categories that are possible. There isn't sort of a limitation on the categories, but those are the ones that we typically see. Now, for extraordinary ability, what the person needs to demonstrate is that they've risen to the top of their field. They're nationally or internationally recognized. People know who they are. They know about their work. And there are 8 specific categories, 3 of which need to be proven at a minimum. If you can prove more, great. These are things like articles that you've published or books that you've written or chapters in a book, original contributions to the field like patents, articles that have been written by others about your work, awards you've won, work you've done as a judge or reviewer. Those are the sorts of things, the specific categories that need to be proven in order to show that somebody has extraordinary ability.
And so, what are the advantages, Chad, of one versus the other of these kind of two options we're talking about here?
So national interest waiver, I would say the bar is a little bit lower. It's not to say that it's a low bar. It's a type of petition that is held to a high degree of scrutiny. And for that, it falls within the second preference category. And now the second preference category is advantageous for a lot of people, for most countries, but we are often contacted by people from India who want to do this. And because the second preference category for India shows about a 12-year wait, our advice is typically it's not worth it for somebody from India to do this. Now, we may look at their priority date and see that it could be advantageous if it was a while ago. But typically for somebody from India, the advice is, work toward some additional achievements, know what the requirements are for extraordinary ability and build toward that first preference category, the extraordinary ability, and that would be worth your time. Even if it takes an additional 2 or 3 years to qualify, it's worth it to go for that instead of going within the second preference category and having to wait those estimated 12 years for a green card.
This is certainly a lot to consider. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us, Chad, before we wrap up?
So the one other thing I have to include, because I always get called on this if I don't, is the EB-5 category. This is they call it sometimes the millionaire green card category. What it requires is an investment in a company or an endeavor that's going to create US jobs. Typically, the investment is around $1 million. The reason I call it a quasi self-sponsorship option is because it does require that the endeavor that's being pursued be successful. So the person is an investor, but then it still relies on a company to make sure that the purposes of the project are fulfilled in order for that person to be able to receive their green card. So I have to add that in, and I throw that in at the end.
Well, thanks for adding that. I think that there is definitely a lot to process here. If you have any questions about self-sponsorship options, please feel free to reach out to us. Our contact information is below. We'd be happy to communicate with you. Chad, thanks so much for joining me today. Have a great week, everybody.